I never thought I'd be the guy writing a story like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. My name is Mike Thompson, and I was happily married to Sarah for 5 years. We met in college, hit it off immediately, and built a life together that I thought was solid. We both had decent jobs, Sarah as a marketing manager and I was working my way up in an IT firm. Everything seemed perfect, or at least that's what I thought. Looking back, I can pinpoint moments that should have given me a clue. Sarah started coming home late from work a lot more often. At first, I chalked it up to her being swamped with projects, but then she got more secretive about her phone. I noticed she'd get this nervous look every time I walked into the room while she was texting. When I asked her about it, she'd just roll her eyes and dismiss me, saying I was being paranoid. I wanted to trust her, but deep down, a nagging feeling started to grow. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise her with dinner. I got home early, set the table, and even opened a bottle of wine. I was in the kitchen when I heard her on the phone in our bedroom. I didn't think much of it until I overheard her say, "I can't wait to see you again, just a few more weeks." My heart dropped. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was a work friend or something, but then I caught her mentioning Mark, and that name hit me like a ton of bricks. Mark was my old mentor, a guy I looked up to, a man who taught me everything I knew about it. He had a successful consulting business and was always kind of a father figure to me. I thought he was a good guy. When I confronted Sarah about it later that night, she laughed it off, claiming I was being ridiculous and that Mark was just a colleague. But the way she avoided eye contact while saying it told me everything I needed to know. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, heartbroken, and in disbelief. I wanted to confront her again, but part of me thought I needed more proof. I started doing some digging. I checked her social media and found some private messages between her and Mark. They were flirty, laden with innuendos that made me feel sick to my stomach. They had been meeting up more often than she let on. My heart raced as I read through the messages, the betrayal slicing through me like a knife. On a Sunday afternoon, I decided to confront her. I wanted to do it in a way that made her see the gravity of the situation, so I gathered my thoughts and made sure to keep my tone calm. I told her I had seen the messages and asked if she had anything to say. Her face turned pale, and for a brief moment I thought she might come clean, but instead she flipped it on me. "Mike, you're being dramatic, you're misinterpreting everything. Mark is just a friend." She shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. I could see the anger building up in her, and it took everything in me not to explode. She went on to say I was insecure and that I needed to trust her. Trust? How could I trust her when she was clearly lying? In that moment, I felt like my world was crashing down. I had dedicated myself to this relationship, and now I was faced with the reality that the person I loved had betrayed me with someone I admired. It was a cocktail of emotions, rage, sadness, and disbelief. I could feel the tears prickling my eyes, but I held them back, refusing to give her the satisfaction. After she stormed off, I sat on the couch, completely dumbfounded. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head. The lies, the anger, the complete disregard for what we had built together. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming, and I knew I had to make a decision. I had to decide if I was going to fight for our marriage or if it was time to take a different path. While I was still processing everything, one thing was clear. I would not go down without a fight. I wasn't going to let her and Mark's betrayal define me. I would rise above this mess, and they would know it. The days that followed my confrontation with Sarah were a blur of confusion and heartache. I was consumed by a storm of emotions, anger toward her, betrayal toward Mark, and disappointment in myself for not noticing sooner. I spent long hours at work, trying to drown out the chaos in my mind. It was during these moments that I began to formulate a plan, an idea that, while initially born out of pain and revenge, would ultimately transform into a pathway for my personal growth. The first step was to confront the reality of my situation. I called a close friend, Jake, who had been there for me through thick and thin. Over beers at our favorite bar, I laid it all out on the table. "She's cheating on me, man." With my old mentor of all people, I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "Dude, that's messed up," Jake replied, his brow furrowed in sympathy. "But you can't let this break you. You've got to use it to fuel your fire." His words hit me hard. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I decided to focus on my career. I'd always wanted to climb the corporate ladder, but I had let my relationship take precedence over my professional aspirations. That was about to change. I started diving deeper into my work, taking on more responsibilities and seeking out new opportunities. I knew that if I could prove to myself that I could succeed, it would help me regain some of the confidence that Sarah's betrayal had shattered. As I immersed myself in work, I began to notice changes in my attitude and outlook. I was no longer the passive partner who let his wife dictate the pace of our lives. I started networking more aggressively, bringing new ideas to my team and volunteering for high-visibility projects. The thrill of focusing on my career took my mind off the pain and betrayal, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. However, I still had to deal with Sarah. She was acting as if nothing had happened, coming home late and being evasive about her whereabouts. I could tell she didn't think I was serious about wanting to end our marriage, and that only fueled my determination. I wanted her to see that I was not the same man she had taken for granted. I began planning my revenge not just on her but on Mark too. One night, while Sarah was out with friends, I decided to look into Mark's business. I knew he had a successful consulting firm, and as luck would have it, I had contacts in the industry who could provide valuable insights. I reached out to a few colleagues who had crossed paths with him, gathering intel on his business practices and reputation. What I uncovered was shocking. Mark's business had been built on a shaky foundation, and there were whispers of unethical practices, especially when it came to the way he treated clients and employees. I knew that if I could gather enough evidence, it could potentially damage his reputation and business. The thought of bringing down the man who betrayed me filled me with a sense of purpose and righteousness. As I continued to collect information, I also worked on myself. I hit the gym more often, focusing on my physical health and well-being. I wanted to feel strong, not just emotionally but also physically. I could feel the weight of Sarah's betrayal slowly lifting as I transformed my grief into determination. I was done being the victim. I would emerge from this stronger than ever. Meanwhile, I figured that I needed to confront Sarah again, this time with the knowledge I had acquired. I wanted her to see the man I was becoming and realize what she was about to lose. The thought of walking away from the marriage was no longer terrifying. It was empowering. I was ready to show her that I could do better, be better, without her. The real turning point came when I received an invitation to a professional networking event that Mark would also be attending. It was the perfect opportunity to not only confront him face to face, but also to showcase my newfound success and confidence. I decided then and there that I would go with my head held high, ready to take on both Mark and Sarah, proving to them that their betrayal only fueled my drive to succeed. As the day of the event approached, I felt a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. I knew I was walking into a lion's den, but I was no longer the prey. I was the hunter. This was my chance to show them both that they had underestimated me. It was time for me to rise from the ashes. I was no longer Mike Thompson, the betrayed husband. I was Mike Thompson, a man ready to reclaim his life and success, leaving the past and those who betrayed me behind. The night of the networking event arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to look sharp and confident. I put on my best suit, the one that always made me feel like I could conquer anything. As I stood in front of the mirror, I reminded myself that this was more than just a professional gathering. It was a stage for my comeback. When I arrived at the venue, a chic downtown hotel with a sleek modern vibe, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Professionals mingled, exchanging business cards and small talk. I took a deep breath and entered, my heart racing not just from the thrill of the crowd but from the anticipation of seeing Sarah and Mark together. I had learned from a mutual friend that they planned to attend, and I was determined to confront them directly. I scanned the room, spotting familiar faces, and then at the far end I saw them, Sarah, dressed in a stunning red dress that hugged her figure, laughing too loudly at something Mark had said. My stomach twisted. Seeing them together stirred a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a desire for revenge. But I quickly pushed those feelings aside. I was here to show them that I had moved on and that their actions had only fueled my determination to succeed. I grabbed a drink from the bar and made my way toward a group of colleagues, engaging in conversation, all while keeping a watchful eye on Sarah and Mark. Every time I saw Sarah smile at him, it felt like another knife twisting in my gut. But I reminded myself that this night was about me, not them. As I mingled, I struck up conversations with higher-ups in my industry. I talked confidently about my recent projects and ideas, and to my surprise, I received genuine interest and encouragement. I felt myself gaining momentum, the thrill of being seen and valued sparking something inside me that had long been dormant. Then I caught a glimpse of Mark walking toward me, a smug look on his face. "Mike, great to see you, man," he exclaimed, extending his hand for a handshake. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us, the history between us hanging in the air like an unspoken tension. "Mark," I said, forcing a smile as I shook his hand, "glad you could make it." I could see the confidence in his demeanor, the way he carried himself as if he were untouchable, but I was determined to change that. "How's the job treating you?" he asked, all too casually. I could hear the condescension in his tone, the underlying message that he still viewed me as beneath him. "It's going really well, actually. I've been taking on some new projects," I replied, matching his casual demeanor but with an edge that I hoped he would feel. "I've even been considering some new ventures of my own." "Oh, really? What kind of ventures?" he asked, feigning interest, but I could tell he was just trying to maintain his position of superiority. "I'm looking into launching a consulting service, something that takes a modern approach to IT solutions, something that incorporates the latest tech trends. You know, the kind of stuff that's based on integrity and transparency," I said, letting that last word linger. I wanted him to know that I was aware of his shady business practices, and I hoped he felt the weight of my accusation. He chuckled, brushing it off. "Good luck with that," he said, trying to maintain his calm facade. "It's a tough market out there." "Yeah, but with the right strategies, I think there's a lot of potential," I replied, my eyes narrowing slightly. It was a cat-and-mouse game, and I was determined to play it well. Just then, Sarah approached, and I could feel the tension thickening. She looked between us, her eyes darting back and forth, clearly sensing the undercurrent of animosity. "What's going on?" she asked, a forced smile plastered on her face. "Just discussing business," I said smoothly, intentionally keeping my tone light. "Mark was just giving me some pointers on navigating the industry." "Right," she said, her voice tight. It was clear she was uncomfortable, caught between her past choices and the reality of my transformation. "Sarah, I'm glad you came. I was just telling Mark about my plans," I continued, ignoring the pang of guilt that threatened to surface. "Maybe we can collaborate someday." She shot me a confused look, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. This was my moment, to show both of them that I wasn't the insecure husband they had thought they could walk all over. I was rising from the ashes, and they would see the consequences of their actions. As the night went on, I saw more opportunities to shine. I spoke to executives, shared my vision, and even received several business cards. I was finally being recognized for my worth, and it felt incredible. The thrill of success began to drown out the pain of betrayal. When the event finally began to wind down, I noticed Sarah and Mark slipping away to a quieter corner, their heads closed together, whispering. My heart raced as I made my way over, adrenaline pumping. This was the confrontation I had been waiting for. "Hey, you two," I said, forcing a smile, but my voice was steady and confident. "I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate the motivation you've provided me. It's nice to know what I'm capable of achieving without distractions." Their faces dropped, and the look on Sarah's face was priceless. She knew I was talking about her deceit, and Mark's smugness faltered for a moment. I could see the realization dawning on both of them. They had underestimated me. With that, I turned to leave, a satisfied smirk on my face. I felt like I had taken back a piece of my power. I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was Mike Thompson, a man who would succeed on his own terms, and they would regret ever crossing me. The aftermath of the networking event left me riding high on a wave of adrenaline and newfound confidence. I had confronted both Sarah and Mark, and while it felt like a victory, I knew this was only the beginning of my journey. I was determined to turn this betrayal into the driving force for my success. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work. I was a man on a mission. I didn't just want to excel, I wanted to surpass everyone's expectations, especially Sarah's and Mark's. I spent long hours at the office, working late into the night, immersing myself in projects and brainstorming innovative ideas. My colleagues began to notice the shift in my demeanor. I was more assertive, more willing to take risks, and it was paying off. Promotions and accolades began to follow, but my personal life was still a tangled web of emotions. Sarah, for her part, attempted to act as if nothing had changed. She went about her daily routines, but the air between us was thick with tension. I could sense her confusion. She didn't know which version of me she was dealing with, the naive husband who had always been accommodating, or the new Mike who was ready to fight back. One evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find Sarah waiting for me. She had set up a small dinner, candles, soft music, the whole romantic vibe. I was taken aback. It was as if she was trying to rewind time and erase everything that had happened. "Mike, can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than I had heard in weeks. I could see a hint of vulnerability in her eyes, but I remained guarded. "Sure," I replied, taking a seat across from her. I wanted to hear what she had to say, but I wasn't about to let my guard down completely. "I know things have been rough between us, and I realize I haven't been the best wife. Lately," she started, her tone almost pleading. "I've been thinking about us a lot. I miss what we had." I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Here she was trying to pull me back into the cycle of denial, as if her lies and betrayal could simply be swept under the rug. "Sarah, you can't just say you miss us after what you did," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "You chose to betray my trust. You chose to be with Mark." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "I know. I messed up, but I didn't think it would come to this. I was just having a rough time and I made a mistake. Can't we work through this?" she pleaded. I shook my head. "Working through it would mean acknowledging the damage and being genuine about it. You've shown me who you are, and I can't just forget that. Trust isn't something that comes back easily." Her expression shifted and I could see anger creeping in. "So what? You just want to throw everything away? You want to act like we never had anything good?" I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "No, that's not it, but I refuse to be the man you cheat on. I deserve better than that." In that moment, I realized I had indeed transformed. I was no longer the insecure husband afraid of losing his wife. I was a man who knew his worth, and I was willing to fight for it. After that confrontation, Sarah seemed to retreat further into her shell. I could feel her frustration and confusion. She was losing her grip on a marriage she had taken for granted. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt liberated. I was finally in control of my narrative. Meanwhile, my professional life continued to flourish. I was getting recognition from upper management, and I even began to build a network of potential clients for my consulting idea. Everything was coming together except for my personal life, which was still a chaotic mess. One evening, I received a call from one of my former colleagues who worked closely with Mark. She had some vital information that could serve as the cherry on top of my revenge. "Mike, you need to know something," she said urgently. "Mark's business is in trouble. He's been cutting corners and not paying his employees properly. People are starting to talk." My heart raced. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. Not only could I expose Mark for the fraud he was, but I could also ensure that Sarah realized she had aligned herself with someone who was about to crash and burn. It felt almost poetic. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, emails, testimonies from disgruntled employees, and financial discrepancies. I knew I had to be strategic about this. I wasn't just going to blast it all out publicly. I wanted it to hit him where it hurt most, in the pocketbook and reputation. As I worked on my plan, I decided to invite Sarah out for dinner again. This time, I wanted to show her that I was moving on, that I had my life together in a way that she could never have predicted. I chose a trendy new restaurant, one that had been getting rave reviews, and I planned to pull out all the stops. When the night arrived, I dressed to impress. I wanted her to see the new me. As we sat down at our table, I could sense her curiosity and uncertainty. She was trying to gauge where we stood, and I was determined to keep her off balance. "I've been doing some thinking, Sarah," I started, my voice calm and measured. "I've realized that I need to focus on my goals and aspirations." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm moving forward with my consulting business," I replied, keeping my tone light. "And I've been making some significant connections in the industry." I watched her face as I spoke, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. She was beginning to understand that I was serious about my transformation, and that I wasn't going to settle for the life we had built together if she didn't respect it. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, her voice lacking the enthusiasm I had hoped for. "But what does that mean for us?" I smiled, the smirk of someone who knew their worth. "It means I'm open to possibilities, but I'm also open to moving on. You've shown me what I deserve, and I plan to make the most of it." The look on her face was priceless, a mix of shock and realization. She was losing her grip on me, and deep down I could see the fear creeping in. She finally understood that I was not the same man she had taken for granted. As we finished dinner, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had taken control of my narrative, and I was ready to face whatever came next. Little did Sarah know, the real storm was still brewing, and I was prepared to unleash it. Mark would soon find out exactly what happens when you betray someone who knows their worth. The weeks following my dinner with Sarah were a whirlwind of anticipation and determination. I was finally in a place where I could focus entirely on my future, and I was excited to see how everything would unfold. My consulting business was coming together, and I felt more alive than I had in years. I was driven, ambitious, and ready to take on the world. As I pushed forward with my plans, I simultaneously gathered the evidence I had compiled against Mark. I knew that the time had come to strike. I had decided that I would expose him in a way that would not only damage his reputation, but would also send a clear message to Sarah about the type of man she had chosen to betray me with. I wanted her to witness the fallout of her choices, not out of spite, but as a lesson in accountability. I decided to approach this carefully. I reached out to a journalist I had crossed paths with in the industry, someone known for digging deep into corporate scandals. After a few meetings and sharing the evidence I had unearthed, he agreed to help me craft a story that would bring Mark's unethical business practices to light. The thought of seeing Mark's empire crumble excited me more than I had anticipated. It was poetic justice, and I could hardly wait. Meanwhile, my interactions with Sarah continued to be strained. She seemed more on edge, perhaps sensing that I was pulling away. I would come home to find her trying to engage in conversation, but I kept my responses short and focused on work. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I simply didn't have the emotional capacity to entertain her attempts at reconciliation. I needed to keep my head clear. Then came the day when everything would change. The journalist I had been working with called me with some breaking news. "Mike, we're ready to run the story. We've got everything we need, and it's going to drop tomorrow morning. You might want to prepare yourself for the fallout." My heart raced. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, yet I still felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. "What exactly will the story say?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "It's going to detail Mark's business practices, the complaints from employees, and the financial discrepancies you provided. We'll also include some quotes from former employees who are willing to go on record. It's going to create quite a stir," he explained. "Perfect," I said, my voice steady. I hung up, my mind racing with the implications of what was about to unfold. I knew Mark would retaliate, but I was ready for whatever he threw my way. I had worked too hard to let fear hold me back now. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about Sarah. I wondered how she would react when the truth came out and Mark's world began to unravel. Part of me felt guilty for what I was about to do, but the other part felt justified. She had made choices, and now she would have to face the consequences, whether she liked it or not. The next morning, I woke up early, my phone buzzing with notifications. I quickly grabbed my phone and scrolled through the news feed. My heart raced as I saw the headline: Local Consultant Accused of Fraud, a Deep Dive into Mark's Business Practices. It was everything I had hoped for and more. I read through the article, my heart pounding as details of Mark's unethical practices were laid bare for the world to see. Social media exploded with reactions, and I could feel my phone vibrating with every new notification. It was a mix of shock, outrage, and disbelief. I knew this would hit Mark hard, and I savored the moment. As I continued to read comments and shares, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I was finally standing up for myself, and the tide was shifting in my favor. Then came the moment I had been waiting for: Sarah's reaction. I walked into the living room to find her glued to her phone, her face pale. As I approached, she looked up at me, her eyes wide with dread. "Did you see this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Yeah, I saw it," I replied, keeping my tone calm. I wanted to let her process the situation. "Mike, this is serious. Mark is in real trouble," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Yeah, and he deserves it," I responded, holding her gaze. "He made his choices just like you did." Her expression shifted from shock to anger. "You knew about this? You planned this?" I nodded slowly. "I gathered the evidence and I had help getting it out there. He betrayed my trust and now he's facing the consequences, just like you should be." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could see the realization dawn on her. The man she had taken for granted was no longer just sitting back and letting life happen. I was fighting back. "Mike, I didn't want this to happen. I was confused and I made a mistake," she pleaded, her voice cracking. I shook my head. "You can't keep playing the victim, Sarah. You made your bed and now you have to lie in it. I've moved on from this. You need to figure out what you want now." The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the realization that she had lost something valuable. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a sense of closure. The transformation I had undergone was palpable, and I was finally reclaiming my narrative. As the day progressed, news of Mark's impending downfall spread like wildfire. I received calls from various media outlets wanting to talk to me about my experiences and insights. I declined the interviews, knowing it wasn't my intention to seek fame, but rather to reclaim my dignity and prove to myself that I was better than I had allowed myself to be. The day ended with me standing in front of the mirror, a mixture of pride and relief washing over me. I had taken control of my life, and I was ready for what came next. Regardless of what Sarah chose, I would rise above it. I had learned the hard way that my worth was not determined by someone else's actions. I was Mike Thompson, and I was ready to embrace my future, no matter how uncertain it might be. The fallout from the article about Mark was swift and brutal. Within days, I watched as his consulting business began to crumble. Employees were quitting in droves, and clients were pulling their contracts in fear of association with a company embroiled in scandal. I had never imagined the impact of my actions would be so profound, but it was a reminder of how quickly the tides could turn. As for Sarah, it was evident she was struggling to handle the repercussions of her choices. She had lost her grip on the life we had built together, and it was becoming clear that she was starting to realize the weight of her actions. I continued to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with beneath the layers of anger and confusion. But I also saw someone who had taken far too much for granted. One evening, after a particularly chaotic day at work, I came home to find her sitting at the dining table, a glass of wine in hand. I could see the weariness etched across her face, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. It was hard to watch someone I once cared for struggle, even if she had caused me so much pain. "Mike, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but soft. I nodded, crossing my arms as I leaned against the kitchen counter. I wasn't ready to let my guard down, but I was willing to hear her out. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "About everything that's happened. I know I messed up and I don't expect you to forgive me just like that, but I want to try to make things right. I miss our life together." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the conversation ahead. "Sarah, you can't just say you miss us and expect everything to go back to normal. It doesn't work that way." She nodded, clearly aware that she had crossed a line. I know, and I'm not asking for that, but I've realized how much I took you for granted. I thought everything would always be fine between us, and I didn't appreciate what we had until it was at risk of being gone forever. Her words struck a chord. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but also a glimmer of hope that perhaps she was truly beginning to understand the consequences of her actions. Sarah, it's not just about what you miss. It's about trust. You broke that trust, and it's going to take a long time for me to even consider rebuilding anything. I get that, she replied, her voice trembling. But I want to show you that I've changed. I'm willing to do the work whatever it takes. Please give me the chance to prove it. I looked at her for a long moment, processing her words. I had fought so hard to reclaim my life, and part of me wanted to believe that she could change. But another part of me reminded me that I couldn't lose sight of my own worth. It's not just about me, Sarah. You have to be committed to this for yourself, not just for me. I know, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I want to be better for you, for us, and for myself. The sincerity in her voice gave me pause. I had always believed in the capacity for change, but could I trust that she had truly learned from this experience? The battle within me raged on for a moment, but ultimately I realized that it wasn't my job to save her. It was my job to focus on myself and my future. I appreciate you saying all this, I finally replied. But I need time to figure out what I want. I can't promise that I'll be able to forgive you or that we can go back to what we had. I'm still processing everything. She nodded, understanding that I wasn't ready to jump back into our previous life. That's fair. I'll give you the space you need, but please know that I'm committed to working on myself and making things right. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to focus on my career and my personal growth. Each day brought new opportunities, and I could feel the momentum building with my consulting business. I began to develop a network of clients who appreciated my integrity and innovative ideas. It felt empowering to know that I was building something on my own terms, free from the shadows of my past. Meanwhile, Sarah began her journey of self-improvement. I would often see her reading self-help books and attending counseling sessions. Though I kept my distance emotionally, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride as I watched her take accountability for her actions. It was clear that she was trying to turn her life around, and while I wasn't ready to welcome her back into my heart completely, I appreciated her efforts. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find Sarah waiting for me with dinner ready. She looked up at me with a hopeful smile, and in that moment I felt a flicker of warmth. The table was set nicely, and I could smell something delicious wafting through the air. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said, her voice cheerful but tentative. I sat down, feeling a mixture of emotions wash over me. It was nice to see her making an effort, but I couldn't ignore the lingering doubts. We sat together, eating in silence for a moment before she broke it. "Mike, I know things are still complicated between us, but I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what." "I appreciate that," I replied, carefully considering my words. "I want to be open to the possibility of rebuilding something, but I also need to take my time. I need to be sure we're both moving forward for the right reasons." "Of course," she said, her expression earnest. "I understand completely. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As we continued our meal, I found myself feeling a sense of cautious optimism. I wasn't ready to dive back into a relationship, but I knew that healing can take many forms, and sometimes it starts with small steps. I had learned so much about myself through this process, and I knew that whatever the future held, I was stronger and more resilient than I had ever realized. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge or punishment. It was about growth, both for myself and for Sarah. I had allowed her betrayal to fuel my ambition, and I was proud of the man I was becoming. Whether Sarah and I would find our way back to each other or not, I knew that I would be okay. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in my worth and prepared to face the future on my own terms.